Welcome to the Inside Out Money Podcast.
Can't even recognize this place. Too many pieces of our past mistakes.
Hi, I'm Maggie, and I believe real change starts from the inside out. So let's work together to improve our money and our lives from the inside out. We will explore all things money and our relationship with it. Join me each week with a rotating set of co-hosts, friends, and interviews. Let's jump in.
It's time, we going round and round and round and
Testing.
round and round.
Check, check. Checky, checky.
Microphone check 1 2. What is this?
Woo, woo. Sing that song you were just singing to do a check.
I like the way you kiss me. I can tell you miss me. I can tell it hits.
Okay, that's our new intro song, Greg. Congratulations.
Well, it probably would be better with like the music behind it.
Well,
the
I can't
acapella
afford-
version. I don't think
Can't
is,
afford the rights for the full music, Craig. You know all the episodes where I really do start it with Erica singing. This one might make the cut.
Please no.
Okay. Hey, Greg.
Hello, Maggie.
That was a very formal hello, Maggie.
It was.
Well, hey, I haven't recorded in... You always go month to month. I haven't recorded in over a month because we were traveling and all this stuff. So I feel a little like out of practice.
Yeah. Does it feel stressful to be back in the grind, so to speak, or?
Not exactly stressful, more just like a muscle that I've let atrophy. Is that the word? It's a big word, right? It's a big word for being back at this for like,
It is, yeah.
1
Well,
minute.
see, there's no atrophication there. If
Yeah.
you
Is atrophication really a word?
were- Not sure. Sounds like it should be, though.
Could be. I'm going to Google it. Atrophication.
Vacation.
Dude, atrophication is is not a word. But atrophic is.
Okay.
And I mean, look, I just did a quick Google, so I'm not positive, but if you know, let us know. Okay. In case you're not sure where you're at, welcome to the Inside Out Money Podcast. This is a personal finance podcast focused on redefining wealth from the inside out. I'm mostly saying that just to remind myself what it is. Each week, I speak with a rotating set of co-hosts about a different financial topic to help you improve your financial mindset and tactics. And today, we have Greg. Welcome, Greg.
Hello. I
I also have to say today's topic was the outcome of an Instagram poll. So I was batting around a few ideas with you, and I was like, oh, we should try to keep it travel related. I don't know. We just got back from a long trip. It doesn't really have to be. It could be on anything. But I was just like, like I said, getting back in things and just being real picky, and a lot of topics weren't getting me excited, and this is a passion project, so most of the time the weekly topic is something that myself or one of the co-hosts happens to be feeling passionate about at any given moment in time. Anyways, there were 2 topics Greg and I were talking about. I put those 2 on an Instagram poll, and then I just threw in a third one that I hadn't even mentioned just for fun, and that's the one that won by a landslide, by 20 basis points, I should say.
Well, I like that you're getting the voice of the listener
Yeah.
in here to really make episodes that listeners want to hear.
Yeah, I mean, I thought you'd like my use of basis points, but thank you for both.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I like that too.
Okay. You like how I feed? I'm telling you what you should like, Greg. See, no atrophication here. Okay. So the topic, perhaps we should share the topic, but you might have seen it if you clicked on this. We are going to talk about how to pack light and spend light while traveling. And it's funny because the pack light you would think is not really a financial topic, but it kind of is. And we'll get into why, because it does save us money in the end. But I'll also say I get a lot when I post stuff about how we pack. I get a lot of questions and curiosity and people striving to pack less.
I think it, speaks to simplification and even being able to do some pretty cool trips with less stuff. I often see people with huge suitcases.
Schlepping.
And they look miserable. Yeah. And I think I couldn't do that for 3 weeks. I wouldn't have done it. I mean, I could have, I guess.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I do think packing light, it does open more opportunities as far as traveling further and longer and not feeling like your luggage is a barrier to that.
And like
Encumbers
encumbered.
you.
Yeah. All sorts of big words on
Yeah,
today's
this is
podcast.
impressive.
Yeah.
What happened in Australia?
I know my vocabulary just, did not atrophy. I'll tell you that. Did not atrophy. Oh, okay. Moving on. So we just got, and what sort of inspired this topic is we just got back from 3 weeks in Australia with our kids. It's summer here in the US. And this is one of the first times we've done a summer vacation this early in the summer. We were like out of school for less than a week, then went on this big vacation, and it was pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was amazing and did a lot of bucket list things. I think some of our other travels have been really wonderful as well, but this was definitely, as far as activities and really just super cool things that we did that we've not always done on other trips. And
yeah, we did more excursions too. Yeah, and I just define an excursion as like, something where we have to pay a fee per person. It's not just like going to a museum or something that's, tends to be a bit more affordable. It's a few $100 per person often. So we did a Great Barrier Reef excursion, which was really cool. One of the best experiences, snorkeling on the Great Barrier Reef up about an hour north of Cairns, and then even further out for the actual outer barrier reef that we went to. But that was like one of the coolest experiences ever. It was like a day trip. It was really cool.
Yeah, it was great. I think the kids absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
I thought it was incredible. We did some other cool stuff. We kayaked out to see whales and dolphins.
In Byron Bay. Yeah, that was really cool.
Sydney Harbor Bridge climb was pretty amazing. Mm-hmm. An Aboriginal tour in Port Douglas. So that was really very cool.
Like the Mossman Gorge area. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was super cool. Greg literally like ground up ants. I was kind of thinking later, I was like, oh, we're vegan. Like, should we really be like eating ants and killing them? I don't know. There's something, I feel bad saying it. I like didn't have the same feelings about ants that I do about cows. But Greg like ground up ants, and then Kate, who was kind of had a cold, like inhaled it, and it was like Vicks Vapor Rub. It really was. Our guide was like a bush medicine expert. We ate some gnarly things throughout the day that like gnarly tasting and just like fascinating, and some delicious things too. Learned so much about plant, like bush medicine, I guess is the accurate term.
And the rainforest, and a little bit about the Aboriginal culture. Again, very much skimming the surface in a 5-hour tour, but was really a cool experience to see that place through someone who is a traditional owner of the land.
Yeah.
People who've been occupying that land for 60,000 years, cultures that have been here far longer, and it was pretty amazing.
Yeah, that one was cool too, because we paid for a half-day tour, and then we kind of got a full-day tour.
Yeah,
for various reasons. But yeah, it was just really, we sort of splurged on some stuff like that, and we're like, when else are we going to be here? And you could argue that in many places, but there happened to just be more, I don't know, opportunities to do things like that in Australia. It was just a really fun, cool trip. And our kids are at an age where, they've always been enjoyable to travel with, but they get like better and better every year. And I kind of worried because we've got some like, more teenagers, and there's just definitely a lot more like moods and tudes at times. Everybody, for the most part, was in like a very good mood, and the kids all got along really well. And look, I'm not sugarcoating. There's certainly times where, people are in moods or things are funky.
Including ourselves,
yeah. Including me, I could say, when we're in close quarters for 3 weeks. But I think in general, like the kids just had a great time and were really fun together. And it was fun to be around them, and it was fun to engage with them. And it was just, that is like, you were just saying this to somebody the other day, Greg. It was just like the quality time we get with them. It's not just like 30 minutes in passing where we get a moment with them between school and some other activity. It's just like focused
3 weeks of
memories,
hanging out every day with them, and it was pretty amazing.
It was cool.
Well, let's move on. Let's cover some of the topics that our listeners clearly want to hear.
So let's talk about packing light real quick, and then we'll shift to the spending. So at a very high level, when we go on trips, whether we've gone on like 6-week trips over the summer with them, and we've gone on 4-day trips, we pretty much pack the same regardless. We pack 3 carry-on size bags, and like international carry-on size bags. So the specific bag we own 3 of is the Away carry-on. It's actually an expensive suitcase, I guess, all things considered. It's like $275 now. I looked it up. And I say international carry-on because it fits that, like a lot of like Americans in particular have like what's called a carry-on, but it won't fit in a lot of the international carry-on restrictions. It's like a couple inches too big, and they have like certain carry-ons have like a flex. Even Away makes one that has like a flex thing. It gets bigger. Those won't fit in the overheads on a lot of international flights, and they'll measure you, and they will not let you on the plane. They'll make you pay for it and check it.
And when we say international, we're talking less about the flight to get from the U.S. to the international destination, but flights within those countries. So actually domestic flights within, or like
Another
in
country.
Europe, traveling from one country to another. That's where they tend to have tighter restrictions as far as the size of the bags.
Yeah. So we have 3 of those. Greg has one, I have one, and then we have one that the kids share. And then everybody else, all 5 of us have a backpack carry-on that we bring. So ultimately we go with 8 bags, a backpack each, and those 3 carry-ons. And you know, the main and look, our kids aren't always happy about that. This year, more than ever, they pushed back a good bit, and we politely told them what our reasons are, which I'll tell you in a moment. And they kind of like understood. I mean, at one point I said, hey, do you want to, we'll talk about trip budgets in a minute, but I was like, do you want to pay for the fees on these domestic flights in Australia for carrying on more luggage? And they were like, yeah, no, I don't want to. And I was like, well, cool. Then this is what we're going to continue to do.
And I think once they realized that we were going to be primarily in Airbnbs, which we'll talk about a little as well, but that we had the ability to do laundry. I think that was, that sort of allayed a lot of concerns. Yeah, I think that they just need to be reminded though. Look, we can do laundry as much as we need to. So
I don't know if you remember, Greg, but the rebuttal to that was, it's not about that. I don't want to have to repeat outfits. And I was like, well, that was when I was like, cool, I feel you. I'm sorry. That feels like, what is something Liz Gets Loaded always says where she's like, I'm really, like, I hate that for you. You know, like, I'm really sorry that, you know, you have to do, like, she just has a good way of saying that. Like, that's your problem, not mine, you know? But ultimately it was like, okay, well, cool. But if that's your priority, then are you willing to pay more? And it's like, they're not willing to pay more either, nor am I. And so I actually love having those, like, transparent conversations with the kids. Cause I'm like, look, there's options if you want to foot the bill for this, but I don't think you do. Greg, what are the main reasons we push on, like, that particular size?
Well, I guess the 2 top ones are space once we're in the country, meaning we've rented a car and we don't want to rent some huge SUV that's, you know, almost double the cost sometimes.
Yeah.
We want to rent a small SUV or a small car. When we were in Europe 2 summers ago, we had a small hatchback and we were able to fit all of our bags in it.
But barely. I mean, you can barely fit these. I'm just saying, like, when you see a small SUV and you fill up the back seat with 3 kids, you can barely fit 3 small suitcases and then a bunch of book bags in it. Like, it's tight. We fill it up.
Yeah.
And we maybe can fit, like, a bag of groceries or one. I mean, one trip we, like, everybody was carrying groceries.
Well, that was that Europe trip, and that car was very small.
Yeah.
But this time was a little bigger. But again, and that saves a lot of money, which we'll talk about later as well. But and then the other big thing is once you're within those countries and you're traveling domestically or country to country within Europe, as Maggie said, the baggage requirements are smaller bags, and many of them have very tight limits as far as what you can bring. They have a weight limit. So Jetstar, which is what we flew in Australia to go from
twice in Australia.
Yeah, we flew that twice in Australia to 2 different cities, and they had a limit of 7 kilograms per passenger.
And man, they weigh on that one flight. They didn't even like check in on it. On that other flight, they weighed us like down to every single, you know, like take off that hoodie and like they were very
specific.
Yeah.
And so
she let me keep my hoodie on, to be clear. I started to take it off because she was questioning the lady in front of us. She was like getting everything off her.
Well, we had a little extra since we had 5 of us, and she was nice enough to like combine.
She measured us as a family. She gave us like 7 times 5. Yeah. She's like, you got 35 kilos. Start.
So if Maggie's hoodie was over by 0.2 of a kilogram, that went against another.
Thank goodness the kids were under.
Yeah, exactly.
Because my drone had to make it. So. But yeah, we saved. I mean, we easily saved a few $100 on luggage fees, which again, I don't mind paying for certain things, but like I don't even personally, like you mentioned this, Greg, it is a hassle to keep up with a lot of stuff. I mean, there's times where one of our kids like forgot a piece of there's only one piece of luggage to keep up with between the three of them. It got left in an airport in one place, right? So there's times where it's a lot to keep up with everything. It's a lot to wheel everything. People have things in their hand. The less we have, the easier it is for us to move on public transport, which we'll talk about too. So I just like it because I don't want to travel heavy. I don't want to live heavy. I don't want to travel heavy. I like traveling light, and it saves us money. So it's like win-win from my perspective.
And we're active travelers, meaning in 3 weeks in Australia, we stayed in six locations.
I think.
So we're moving every few days. We're not like rolling up to a huge resort and having the bellman bring our stuff up and then parking it there for 3 weeks. We're on the move. So again, it would just feel so heavy.
Yeah.
Both weight-wise and just the amount of stuff we have to drag with us if we had more luggage. So I think it suits our style of travel as well.
Yeah, that's a great way of saying it. So we'll just share a little bit logistically, because like Greg, you mentioned laundry. So when I've had multiple people on Instagram were like, how do you do that? The quick answer is I tell the kids general guidelines for what they can pack. I'm like 3 to 4 outfits, a hoodie, a pair of long pants, pajamas, a couple of bathing suits, 1 pair of shoes each, like athletic shoes, 1 pair of like flip-flops or sandals. I'll get really specific. I'm like a raincoat if we need one. Whatever it is, I'll get specific. And then whatever other stuff, we each bring a sand cloud towel with us, which has usually been pretty helpful. And so they get that guideline, and we kind of know what will fit in this amount of stuff. And then we also pack a lot of clothing that I would call like dry fit. So, it's the kids' Lululemon short, like athletic shorts or athletic tops. And so those dry a lot faster, which is nice. But then we do laundry. And so we had a washing machine at every single Airbnb on this trip except one of them, which was actually like our first stay. So it was good timing. So I'll look for places with laundry. It's not hard to find most of the time. It's quite easy. I don't even have to look for it. Most of the time it just has it. And there have been times when we've been in hotels and we didn't have it. And some people might remember my Instagram stories from a couple of years ago where I had like a salad spinner. I was using it. I will like sink wash things with like liquid detergent or powder detergent that I bring with me on a trip, or you can buy locally. I'll hand wash like dry fit material type stuff, underwear, things that I, need to. And then I'll hang dry it the hang drying is annoying. Like the spin cycle in a washing machine is critical because it really dries things a lot faster after that. But I have been known to dry things in a salad spinner in Europe when we didn't have a washing
mixed
machine.
results, but
and it was like, I'll admit, it was a huge pain in the ass. It was kind of funny, and it was like became this like joke on the trip. It was a little bit of a like inconvenient pain in the ass. It was really nice on this trip to have like, I want to quote say normal washer and dryer, because like when you're in Europe, the dryers are not functional or they don't exist, and you just have to hang dry everything. Which is fine when you have dry fit stuff. When you have cotton clothes, if you're somewhere for a couple days, it's fine. Or if you can put it outside on a line. But the point is, we do laundry, so we don't need that many outfits. And we end up buying things on the trip, and we tell the kids like, hey, we want to buy you a shirt, a something, memories from these places. And you got to pack light if you want room to add some new things on the trip.
And I think that always helps them
motivate them
to pack light and yeah, that's important.
Okay, so that's the gist of the packing, or I don't know, packing secrets. And look, I'm not like bragging about this approach. There are people who despise this and think this is like the worst way to travel and are like, I could never. Oh, also the other thing is we'll never check a bag. I do not believe in checking bags. This was always like a running joke at work, because there were people when I would travel for work, there was a group of people that would check things and like were just religious about it, and then there were people that would not check things. We would always joke, we're like, we're not waiting for you if you checked a bag. We're like, I'm in a cab on the way to the hotel, like I'll see you there. Yeah. And so there was always just like two camps of people. But I don't like checking stuff unless I absolutely have to, and I just don't want the risk of like losing my stuff. It's so much easier to and not have to like deal with baggage claim and all that. I know people swear by it. It's not for me. Yeah. I like carrying my stuff on.
I would say if you're someone who has traditionally traveled heavier and brought a bigger suitcase and checked it in, and I would challenge you to just try to pack light with just a carry-on for a trip and just see what your experience is, because I do think whatever you are giving up as far as, well, I wanted to bring 3 pairs of shoes and I'm only bringing 1.
Yeah.
I think is probably made up for by just how light you feel. It just feels so much easier when you're trudging up and down the stairs in an Airbnb in Europe, and it's narrow staircases, and it's so much easier than carrying big heavy suitcases. And so give it a shot, see if it's for you. If not, I can't imagine traveling any other way personally though.
Well, and the other thing, I totally agree, Greg. The other thing I was going to say is, on the flip side, there are people who travel with like everything in their book bag. They don't consider what we do traveling
that's true.
light. So
very fair point.
Look, everybody has their own way of traveling. You do you. This works very well for us, and our kids have become very accustomed to it. And again, though they have their questions and sort of pushing back, which I like to, entertain and answer their, like, I want to have the discussion. And if there's a different solution that they can convince me of, like, all for it. But once they understood why we do it, they don't want to change it either. So, and I didn't hear a single complaint on the trip about number of outfits, or, I was reminding somebody, even with, when you pack stuff for 3 or 4 outfits, you can make, 8 or 9 outfits with that. Yeah. Okay. So we will switch to spending light. So we try to pack light. I'm not sure I'd say we try to spend light. We definitely are thoughtful. This is sort of like what we do in our everyday life, right? We are thoughtful and intentional about certain things, and then we are splurgy, and which is still intentional, right? We're frugal on some things, we're splurgy on other things. We travel the exact same way. I would say we splurge a bit more when we travel than we do at home in everyday life. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, travel's our big spend category. It's our big thing I think for both of us, when we think about what are the things I would regret if I don't do much, if I don't do it enough. Travel is one of those. It's something that we think it's such a learning experience for our kids. So yes, we spend a good bit on travel. But as Maggie said, there are things that we are very intentional about, and we try to spend lighter in some areas so that we can splurge on the, kayaking trip to go watch whales.
Excursions, or ice cream every night.
That too,
good quality ice cream. Big priority for pretty much everyone in the family except me, because I'm less excited about ice cream. But our kids are very excited about ice cream, and I think I'd put Greg in the same. Yeah. You have the same level of passion and desire for ice cream as they do. Okay, Greg. Let's talk about what I think is one of the coolest financial things we do when we travel with the kids. That is just like, we've been doing it for years and it works out really, really well.
That's pretty amazing, I think. We set budgets for the kids. We give them money for clothes / souvenirs / things they want to purchase. This doesn't include outings to get ice cream or food or anything like that. We still give them that stuff. But before this, every place we went to, every gift store, everything that happened to look cool to them, especially when they were younger kids and everything was like exciting, was, I want this. And then we were having to say, no, you probably don't really want that. No, don't you want something later?
Yeah. Or we're like one day into a long trip and we're like, really? Like, we've got a lot more places we're going. And
so we give them a budget. It sort of depends on the length of the trip. But usually for these bigger summer trips, it's been about $100.
It's called the trip budget.
And their grandparents have started giving them some money towards that as well. So this year they had more than 100. And that is their money for the duration of the trip to buy the things they want to buy. When they see a sweatshirt that looks cool, a t-shirt, a pair of earrings that are really cool and unique and something they won't see back home, that's the money. And
they're super keyed into the conversion rates as a result, Greg. Like they know the Australian dollar versus the US dollar, because, we kept sort of translating their money or converting their money, but they were like, well, how much is it in finally, we just converted their trip budget to Australian dollars. And Greg, you kept a notepad the whole time. And at one point, like halfway through the trip, Kate was like, can you just share that directly with us so that we don't have to keep asking you? And he was like, yeah, of course. And so they could, when we were back on Wi-Fi at the Airbnbs, they could open it and see where they were at. But Greg logged everything they bought the whole trip, and we were it just works great. They manage it themselves. They never ask for anything. They just make their own decision, and they sometimes talk aloud about it.
Yeah.
We'll sort of,
they become very conscientious about the way they spend their money. Yeah. They weigh things out. They see things they want. They really think about it. They will ask, well, how many days are we in this town? Like, if we don't get this today, will I have a chance to come back if I decide I want it? And, we'll be here for 3 days. So, like, you've got some time to think about it. So they're not making impulse purchases. It's really cool to see how they think through spending money.
I agree. I enjoy watching. And they each have different personalities, right? We've talked about this a little bit. One of them is much more really wants wants like shirts from each place and is just she's very thoughtful and very thoughtful about her decisions. Another one's a little more spendy. One had like leftover money and was, I don't remember what she was making deals with people about at the end, but she was like offering to buy something for somebody. And so there, you just really see like their personalities come out, and they learn throughout things, and they take our advice about like, I really think you should wait until this next thing. Like, and so it's been fantastic. And I just like watching it because they're like adults and they make their own decisions. And I like seeing it because I think it's a tiny little, microcosm for how they will deal with money in the future, and a little experience for them.
I totally agree. I mean, I think this is setting them up for being thoughtful consumers in their future life versus just asking as much as they want and being told yes or no. That doesn't help anyone learn how to spend money thoughtfully. It just is, I'm just going to ask as much as I can, and I'll get some yeses and I'll get some no's, and I'll call it a day. Right, yeah, and it really doesn't teach them anything.
Yeah. Okay. Another thing we do to spend light is we really don't buy any souvenirs. So we try every like kind of new place we go to, not like every city, but like when we go to Australia, I bought one Christmas ornament the whole time, kind of two, because I bought this like keychain that could also be one. But so I basically bought 2 Christmas ornaments during 3 weeks for our quote souvenir. And I love it during Christmas because we put all the ornaments up that we've gotten from all the different places we've been to with and without the kids. And it's just like a fun memory that, comes up every year. Other than that, we buy like things we kind of need as memories. So I would say like half the clothes I ever buy, I buy while traveling. Mm-hmm. And I don't know.
A fair amount of my like t-shirts at least.
So like Greg needed a new bathing suit. He found a nice one at a surf shop somewhere. He got 2 t-shirts. I didn't need a new pair of shorts. I don't need anything, to be clear, but I bought a new pair of shorts, a hoodie, and 2 t-shirts. And those are, to me, they're like useful things in addition to souvenirs. Some good examples though were like one time we needed like bowls for the kitchen, and when we were in Europe, I bought like these 5 bowls, and I love them. We use them all the time. Mm-hmm. When we were in Japan, I bought cloth napkins, which we use like literally every single day, all day long, and still use them, and they work great. And so we like to buy like things we need, whether clothing or just like other household stuff, when we're traveling, because then it's like a souvenir, but it's something useful in our lives, and we still have a cool memory of wherever we went. So, and we really don't buy like souvenirs for friends or family. Like we happen to, on our way out, the Tim Tams in Australia it's like this cookie that's from Australia, or popular in Australia. We bought like a lot of them on our way out because we liked them so much, and just like the night before we went to the grocery store and brought a ton home and gave them to people. But that was like, a little edible souvenir. And so that is one way we spend less. What's another way we spend less, Greg?
Well, one is I think it's finding the balance between using public transportation and renting cars when we need to. So in cities, for instance, we try to use public transportation. It's usually very cost effective. In Sydney, for instance, we got around using public transportation. We So
Greg, to be more specific, like we'll literally and we plan the rental car around we return it when we get to Sydney, because Sydney's a city where it costs more to park that car, and we don't need a car. There's great public transport. So I just want to clarify that as an example, very methodical about when we do and don't have a car. Sometimes that means, breaking up a car rental into, a few different rentals. Having a gap where we had a car for part of it, then we don't have a car for 5 days.
Yeah, we had 2 separate rental cars during this trip for that exact reason. So public transportation is great. Like in Sydney, for instance, transportation related and excursion related. There's ferries, there's boat tours you can do to see the city, or you can take the public transportation ferry that's, a couple dollars and see some amazing views. And you don't have the narrator, but I'm sure you could actually even download audio tours if you really wanted to get that. So that's pretty neat.
So one thing on public transit too is just a tip, make sure almost everywhere they have kids rates that are a lot cheaper. So you can get a specific pass that's for kids and weigh that against what the other cost is. There's a daily max. You just tap your credit card on and off of every city bus in Sydney. It's similar in many other countries in Europe, and there's just a daily max, and it kind of charges you per trip, but it'll max out at a certain point. But the kids rate is cheaper. And so if you go to the trouble to go speak to an actual person and get the kids card, it is usually cheaper. And so we usually do that for our kids. But in general, just read up and learn how public transit works, because most big cities and even some smaller ones in Europe have really good good public transit, and you really don't need it's actually easier to get around than if you had like rented a car, and significantly cheaper than doing like Ubers and Lyfts and stuff like that. That being said, we will splurge on like an Uber or Lyft from like the airport to our house, especially depending on like the time we get in or how easy the public transit is. So like there's 5 of us, and so we're often weighing, you know, and if we get in late at night, we're not going to hit that daily max, and so of the public transit. And so sometimes we'll just weigh and we're like, oh, it's $30 or $40 to get a Uber into our place. We're tired. We've been traveling all day. We don't want to figure out how to use the public transit while we have all our luggage with us, and, you know, it's late at night and we're in an unfamiliar place. And so I do think it's nice to kind of mix it at times, but I'm a huge fan of public transit in cities and when you're traveling. And I think you also like get a local flavor and spice of the city. Like you get the vibe of how the locals travel. And like we had a really nice conversation with someone on the bus one day.
A woman who had moved to Sydney from Mexico for graduate school.
And spent some time in Atlanta recently. Or like a suburb of Atlanta.
A neat conversation. In France, we had a conversation with a bus cop who was there patrolling to make sure people were using, weren't like abusing the kids' tickets as adults. Or
didn't have tickets at all. Really, after she realized we had the proper tickets, she was like really nice and told us all about her job. Yeah. And, like, it's cool.
In the transportation category, rental cars, we've already talked about it a little bit, but just make sure you're renting a car that's no bigger than you need. They always want to upgrade you to a bigger, fancier car. Get the one that fits your family and fits your needs, and don't be tempted to do some big upgrade.
Man, the lady at the counter who was like, oh, it's only $35 a day. I was like, I got this car for like 10 days. What do you mean only?
Yeah. And if you book ahead, you can usually get really good rates. And the other thing we did for one of our 2 car rentals is actually on one of our credit cards, we have an annual travel credit that can only be used if you book things through that credit card's travel portal. So we booked the car through there. It covered most of it, and then there was a $50 balance, and I used points to cover that. So that rental was free, or at least paid through our annual card fee. So that was pretty exciting as well.
We also don't put 2 drivers down. We save money on that. They always charge more for 2 drivers. Greg's really adept at driving on the other side of the road because he grew up in St. Thomas and they did that there. And so anytime we're like in another country and it's like driving on the other side of the road or the steering wheel's on the other side of the car, he's like the guy. And I actually love driving, but like when we travel out, and especially in other countries, I will happily give up the wheel to Greg. And it's cheaper because we're only having to list one person. And so it's funny, the kids one time were like, how come he's always got to drive? And I was like, well, just saving money. They're so used to hearing that as the answer for everything. Okay, another thing that we used travel credits or points miles for were the airline tickets. So this is a big way that we do save money when we travel. Look, we're not at a point in our life where we can travel during off-peak times because we're traveling with our kids when they're off school, which is usually during peak travel times. But we are somewhat cautious about where and when we're traveling. And so this summer, as an example, we were looking at Australia or Japan. Those were places the kids were very interested in going to. And we had actually already been to Japan, but not Australia, but we were willing to do either for the kids. We were keeping an eye on mileage deals to both places. And for a while, prices were expensive and mileage tickets were really high to both places. And we were like, we don't know if we're going to see anything. And then a little bit before Thanksgiving, we saw some really good mileage deals to Australia. I would have to go back and look it up, but it was good. And so we decided at that time, we're going to go to Australia. And we had to, we got a little, we traveled on a Wednesday to a Wednesday, 3 weeks apart. We didn't travel on weekends. I mean, we were doing things that we can do. Where we can be flexible, we're being flexible. And so we were able to get 4 tickets with miles, and then we paid for a 5th ticket with money. And so we got 5 tickets for about $2,000. Mostly because that 5th ticket was about $2,000. So we had that and then some fees and stuff. So that was a huge way we spent money. Otherwise, that would have cost us over 10 grand. And we have gone on trips where we had to spend, a lot to buy 5 plane tickets to some other country. So where we can do miles, it's a huge savings for us.
And even traveling in and out of the same city has tended to be cheaper when we've at least looked for flights. That's been the case, not last summer in Europe or in the UK, but when we did Europe, we flew in and out of
Amsterdam and Belgium
for the most part, and this we flew in and out of Sydney. And so I think you know, a lot of times you think, well, gosh, I want to start in one city and end in another. There are ways to build an itinerary around flying in and out of the same city. And if that's significantly cheaper, do that. And flights within Australia, the Jetstar flights were pretty affordable compared to if we said, no, we're going to fly into Sydney and fly out of
like we looked at like flying
Brisbane
out of Perth
or something,
somewhere
or
else.
Perth,
Yeah, it was much more.
some other city that's much further across the continent.
And like when we did Europe, we flew home from Belgium. I didn't even want to go to Belgium. Actually, it was lovely, but I didn't want to go there originally. I just was like, well, this is where there's a really good mileage deal too, and so we shall make our way to Belgium. Yeah. So we sort of planned the trip to start in Amsterdam and end in Belgium. And so, yeah, we try to be flexible as we can be, given we're flying during peak periods. We also stayed at a lot of Airbnbs, as we mentioned. And so one way I think Airbnbs for us, for a family of 5, we actually save money by doing that because we've got to get 2 hotel rooms. And it's very inconvenient to be in 2 hotel rooms because you're not like living together. You're in 2 different places, right? Especially like, you know, our kids would be in one, we're in another. I don't love the safety of it. I don't like that we don't have like a big open kind of community family space. So I'm supposed to be away with my kids for 3 weeks and then we're like relegated to 2 different rooms. So I love Airbnbs anyways, but they also often are cheaper. And because of public transit, you don't have to be like right in the heart of the city. You can be a little bit further out. And we don't stay in ones that are way further out. But sometimes just, you know, one little, like even in Sydney, we stayed in what was considered a neighborhood of Sydney, but it was like considered a beautiful, one of the more popular neighborhoods to live in. And I got a much more of like a vibe of what it'd be like to like live in Sydney and, you know, take the bus into the city and stuff. And so we were still very close to things. And I mean, it was like a 25 minute walk to the Sydney harbor and things like that. But we could have stayed 5 minutes from the harbor and we didn't. And so we
would have been in a tourist zone and surrounded by only other tourists, which is kind of not why you go to a country.
We were in like a quaint kind of brownstone neighborhood and it was really cute. And so I think that's one way we save money. And obviously Airbnbs come with kitchens.
Right. And so eating at home tends to be cheaper, especially with 5 people. It can get pretty expensive eating out. So we try to, in our Airbnbs, buy groceries. We're not eating every meal at home, but if we can often get some breakfast foods and maybe some lunch foods, snacks, that helps a lot. Even desserts, we do like to eat out and do a lot of desserts, but some nights we can kind of get by saying, okay, well tonight let's just, you know, go to the grocery store and buy stuff. It was interesting. We found groceries to be very pricey in Australia. So there were points where we were moving enough that we thought it might actually be cheaper to eat out than to buy food, not necessarily be able to finish it all. But that's just something to think about, and something we've enjoyed is that mix of eating out and then cooking at home. And especially things like breakfast that are pricey, and you can very cheaply buy some yogurt and some croissants to have in your house, and the kids are just as happy with that.
They're often happier.
Yeah, they really are usually.
And then, like you said, Greg, the groceries were like oddly expensive in Australia. But I also, it's some like we ate out more on this trip than we have on many other trips. And some of it was like we were flying a lot, so it just didn't make sense to be like encumbered with a lot of food that we had to move from place to place via airplanes. But also we just, you know, the kids like wanted to eat out more, but also it's like hard, like, gosh, the amount of energy in trying to find like the one place that everybody wants to eat out at, like even just a genre of food. I'm like, who wants pizza? I got like one person wants pizza. I'm like, yesterday you 2 wanted pizza. Now nobody wants, now this person wants. It's just hard to get everybody feeling the same vibe, ourselves included. And so one of the things that I found helpful is like, I was literally like Googling restaurants with good kids menus in Sydney. Cause even the food, you know, the restaurant food was expensive, the grocery food was expensive, but we'd be in restaurants where, you know, an entree is $20, $25, $30. And well, sometimes that was Australian dollars too. But I started to pretend I just equated it as US dollars, even though it wasn't. But then there'd be kids meals that were like $10. And my kids know, I don't care what you order. You can order from the adult menu, but you have to eat it. You can't take 2 bites of it, decide you don't like it, and then whine and say you're hungry an hour later because you didn't eat your dinner. And so they kind of got on the like kids meal bus half the time, not all the time. Sometimes people would order from the adult menu, but they just knew they had to like eat it and they were committed to that meal. And so they take their choices much more seriously and they're not like flippant with what they order. And I think we saved a decent amount of money by just sometimes finding a place with a solid kids meal where everybody everybody could order something that was a little more simple and to their liking.
Well,
also.
exactly. That's some of it too. Is certain restaurants, kids want to eat out, but then they get there and they're like, this doesn't.
Yeah.
They don't really see anything they like, whereas a kid's menu is usually going to be stuff they
One of them still
enjoy.
just wants like chicken fingers for most of their meals. I won't name who that is, but you know who you are if you're listening. Okay, Greg, you can hit the final one that we do to save money because you're in charge of that department.
Well, the last thing, and we've covered this in previous episodes, this is just a reminder, is international cell coverage. Most of your plans in the U.S. will say, oh, we'll give you an option for $10 a day for half a gigabyte of data, which is insanely expensive if you're there for 21 days. We usually buy eSIMs and purchase them, download them to our phone, and get an international data plan from whatever country we're going to be in. So we each spent $20 for 10 gigs of data that was good for 30 days.
So in total, we spent $40 to have Wi-Fi and cell coverage the whole time we were in Australia.
Yeah.
Which is great.
It's great.
And to Greg's point, in episode 48, which is 5 cell phone hacks to save you thousands, we talk about that whole process in more detail. And there's even an Instagram story where we link to one of the eSIM providers that we've used a lot in the past. But it's if it sounds complex to you, it's not that difficult.
Yeah, it's really pretty easy. And there's a lot of blogs about it. We use one eSIM provider for Europe, but when I looked in Australia, there just wasn't good options. So I just Googled it and found, these cool travel blogs where people said, this is the best one I found. And, here's how much it is. And it's super easy and straightforward and definitely the way to go, in my opinion.
Yeah, totally agree. Okay, so there's a ton of things you can do to save money while traveling. Again, we're not like the most super, super frugal travelers. We're way more frugal with our luggage than we are with our money while we're traveling. But we are very thoughtful and intentional. And so those are some of the things we do to save money while we are traveling and to, as we say, spend light and then also pack light. I hope that is in some way helpful or interesting or appalling if you are just like, I can't believe they pack that way. They're crazy. I have been told that by people, and I'm okay with that. I like being crazy.
Yeah, I think if you're being called crazy, but
crazy
your
awesome is what they mean. Yeah,
allowing you to have amazing adventures.
Yeah, and it keeps me happy. Yeah. So if it again, do what makes you happy. If packing light is cringy to you, don't do it. But it's not, because we think it's crazy awesome. Okay. Oh, I forgot that we have like a closer to the podcast. That's the sort of stuff I forgot about because it's just been a while. Well, on that note, thank you all for listening. We know your time is very limited and valuable, and we appreciate you spending some of it with us. If you have enjoyed this episode, you can always give us a written review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. We really appreciate it.
We also encourage you to share this episode with a friend or family member to encourage ongoing discussions about money. You can also subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Also, I encourage you to plan a trip with a family member or friend or your family, and then you can send them the podcast and be like, hey, let's go somewhere fun, because I just think travel is great. I just love seeing other parts of the world and other parts of the U.S. and experiencing things. So perhaps this will remind you to go plan a trip. They say a lot of the happiness you get from travel is actually in the travel planning process and leading up to the trip. So it's like the gift that not keeps on giving, but gives prior to the actual trip. But anyways, if you have any thoughts or questions, we would love to hear from you, and you can always leave us a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370, or you can hit us up on Instagram. Okay, thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Maggie. Bye.
Bye.